Hello and welcome to this edition of Resource PNG. Thank you for joining us. In this edition, we take a look at Trans Wonderland Limited. This company is a success story in itself, as it has made the best of the resource boom and they are thinking big. The story following that is about 3 helicopters that the Australian Defence Force is leasing to the PNGDF for the next 2 years, with Heavy Lift overseeing their choppers' maintenance and servicing. And we also have an interview with Matthew Morris, the Deputy Director of the Australian National University's Development Policy Centre, who talks to us about how PNG can make this resource boom into a success story. So to start, we have that interview with the General Manager of Trans Wonderland Limited, Ripon Saripo, with host Emma Pana.
Hello viewers, welcome to Resource PNG. With me today from Trans Wonderland Limited, we have the General Manager, Mr. Ripon Saripo. Thank you for your time today. The company Trans Wonderland Limited is a homegrown transport company made up of several landowner groups from the Western Province and the Southern Highlands region.
Yep.
Tell us more about this great company.
Yeah, Emma, thank you. And I think first of all, I would like to thank MTV for allowing us to come and tell our story. It's a wonderful story. Yes, it is made up of, it was actually started in June 2009. And then we only had an operation up in Moro. Yeah, we have shareholders ranging from the central region in Kutubu, and then on the northern side down to Heights, Stari area, and also we have options here for the people from Angore, Juha in the Western Province, and also down to the border of Kikori. So it actually covers most of Southern Highlands, the New Hela province, into Western, and down into the Kikori region, down on the border.
So this is having ownership in a business that benefits all the landowner groups in this region.
That's correct. That's correct.
Now, with the rough terrain
Yes.
that you and I are well aware of up in
Yes.
that region, I understand your drivers need to be very experienced to be able
Yes.
to drive through the terrain and with the slippery roads and everything. Tell us more about your people.
Yeah, I mean, we have a really good team, and that's most probably the reason why it's reflecting in how we do our business. Our drivers especially are also very important, but we also have mechanics who do a great job and make sure the trucks are in order, because as you know, the road is horrendous. It's terrible. Going up after Goroka, going into Kundiawa, into Hagen is a bit okay, and then going into Moro and driving all the way back into Heights and Tari, it's terrible. So you have to have very skillful drivers. And thankfully we do have some good ones, but there are also other big trucking companies buying trucks as a result of the LNG project. So the driver issue is a big issue for us, but we have a driver training system in place where we get our drivers from the infield, which is work done in the project area. That's different from the long haul trucking, which is driving from Lae, which is the main port, all the way through the highlands and into Moro or into Heights. So we get our drivers from the infield who drive around in the project area, and when we see that they are fit to go onto the highway, then we stick them on the highway trucks.
And how many people employed under this?
Well,
the
actually,
Trans
when we
Wonderland?
started in 2009, in June, we had about 102 people working for us, including managers and staff. Right now, as we speak, we have 386 at last count before I came.
That is phenomenal.
Of that, 22 managers, 12 are expert managers, and 12 are national managers.
And talking about your people, which are very, very important in any organization, you did say about the upskill.
Yes.
Do you have an apprentice program in place to ensure that the skill sets of the people are transferred across?
That's right. That's something that we have been looking at, and as you can see, we have the growth has been tremendous in the last. We have been around for only 2.5 years, going towards our 3rd year.
Wow.
So we have had no time to think about out of these things. But now we have the HR manager. Now we have a new CEO coming on board, and this is something that we want to drive. So at a certain given time, we would like to think that we will have enough, local and national managers step up to the plate as and when we feel that, they are capable of, doing what our expert colleagues are doing, then, that should happen.
That's to ensure there is sustainability in the business.
That's right.
Now, with the LNG project that will come to an end later on down the line,
Yes.
Where is the future for Trans
Well, that's
Wonderland?
right. This is the issue with project-based companies, and we are one. So we're very, very mindful and aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have plans to. We are looking at options to diversify, because the demand for trucks will drop off about towards the end of 2013, mid 2014. And so, we are looking at options at the moment in PNG as well as with overseas partners.
It's a great story about Trans Wonderland being a homegrown transport company, and you've just mentioned about the skill sets of your people, ensuring that the training is in place for them and ensuring that there is sustainability across the business. Are you looking at getting international accreditation for your drivers so that perhaps they could be employed in other businesses?
That's right. I mean, eventually that's got to come to head. Not only with our drivers, but even our mechanics and in our other areas of operations too. So we have big dreams. So in order to go there, we've got to get all this in place. And the manpower is really important, human resource.
We shall be back for more. See you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching Resource PNG. Let us continue with that interview with Trans Wonderland Limited General Manager Ripin Saripul.
And coming back to the terrain that you
Yes.
operate within, we've got 2 seasons, the wet and dry seasons,
Yes.
but I believe during the very wet season, you'd have the danger of landslides and the uncertainties. How does Trans
Yes,
Wonderland Limited handle?
This is the question I like. Not a single day goes by without issues on the highway. Some man-made, some natural. And when it rains, the highway is in a terrible condition. And it's been really, really hard for not only Trans Wonderland, but all the other trucking companies as well. And I just hope and plead to the government that they do something about this. One truck makes a trip up to Moro or to Hides and comes back, goes straight into the workshop. And so the service cost of running a truck along the highway is horrendous. Not only that, when we have issues with trucks or breakdown or due to road condition, tires burst or something goes wrong in the truck and they stop, the people from the vicinity, they will come and they just demand compensation for having the truck breaking down on the road, unheard of. And that is terrible, so we are running business in a very, very trying condition. Very trying condition.
And the challenges that you need to face day
very
in,
challenging.
day out.
That's right.
How many do you have in your fleet?
We started off with 17 trucks. That's long-haul trucks running up and down the highway, discounting the infield trucks. And right now, as we speak, we have 85 trucks, and we've put on order another 39. So the first 12 has arrived on the wharf. So by about mid-June, we will most probably end up with about 120 trucks in our fleet. That's only the long-haul trucks, discounting the trucks that work in the infield.
That is great. Tell us some of the good things that Trans Wonderland Limited are doing.
Yeah, well, first up, I would say the employment of people from within the project area. Trans Wonderland actually is Papua New Guinea. We don't employ people only from the project area. We employ people from everywhere, southern, northern, islands, highlands. And, it's a pity I didn't bring the percentage of people from the country, from which areas and that's something we watch too. And like I was saying earlier, we don't see ourselves as a landowner company. We are, but we don't see it that way. We run it like a business, a corporation. And the company has its own constitutions that the directors and us abide by, the management and policies. So it's run like a profession, but just run like a corporation. But just going back to your question about some of the good things that we have done. Well, you see, in the constitution it states every year dividend will be declared if the directors decide so, and of that 5% of the 25% dividend that will be declared, the 5% is set aside for community work, and the 20% goes to the shareholders. And so the 28 shareholders who own Trans Wonderland are companies, and these companies then have shareholders. So we pay a dividend to these companies who then distribute to the shareholders, and so that's how they get benefit out of that. And so, well, the managing director, the chairman, and the board, they see that just waiting to get a dividend every year is not as good as they would have liked to for the people to participate directly in this LNG project. So they came up with the idea of them buying trucks and putting into Trans Wonderland. We manage it for them, and then we pay them out a check every month. So we call it the consortium trucks. So these landowner companies have bought 10 trucks and stick them into our fleet, and we manage that for them, and we pay them out every month. So we most probably would have up to now paid something like 2 million to these 10 trucks, money made by 10 trucks, directly to them, apart from the dividend. So that's some of the things we do. And in those 10 trucks, I tell you, the hella women have bought a truck too, not only the guys.
Great.
So that's good, and they're ecstatic.
So it's encouraging people to grow their own business.
That's right.
But you support them as a management company.
That's right. So the Hello Women now own a 1 million kilowatt truck that makes money for them and write us a check to them every month.
That's outstanding. So you spoke about the growth of the business. What are the other areas that you'd like to venture into apart from transportation?
Yeah, I mean, we have plans, and all I can say is we will be diversifying into, we've already identified 2 or 3 options that we'd like to take, and we'd like to take sooner rather than later. Because, like I said earlier, the LNG project is gone up, and now it's facing down. Mm-hmm. And so that would mean that, we've got to look for how we're going to utilize all these trucks.
My next question, why Trans Wonderland? Why the name Trans Wonderland Limited?
Okay, there you go. That's a good question. How it all started is there was an explorer by the name of Jack Heights, and I think he went up to the highlands, and he went up to the, I'm not sure whether he flew or went up to the top of the mountain, and he saw this valley down there that was never, seen before, explored before. And the first word that came out of his mouth was, "Jeez, look at this, it's a wonderland." And so that's how the name came about, Trans Wonderland.
Wow,
yeah.
That's interesting. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us around this great company?
I'd like to just thank, our supporters, and especially the shareholders who have been patient with us. The managing director, who has been very instrumental, the chairman, the board, actually, because although we are in essence a landowner company, they keep their distance from the management. We are paid to run the business, so we do that. And they are there to make policies, and then we take out the directions. And I think that is where the success is, where there is no mixture of the directors getting involved in the day-to-day running of the business. So I think I should acknowledge that. And we have managers who are very experienced managers, both experts and nationals, who work very hard. We have a wonderful staff who are committed to what they do. Some of them work even late hours. So that, and we have backers who support us. There's many of them. I can't call all of them, but the financial institutions who have supported us and all that. So they have believed in us. Although we have been just around for a year or two, they were willing to come in and support us.
Well, Mr. Sarepo, thank you so much. It's been a privilege talking to you about this great, wonderful company, especially being a homegrown transport company that has come with collaboration, taking ownership and running it like a true business, and all the best for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
When we come back, we have that story of the 2-year lease of those helicopters between the Australian and PNG Defence Forces. Thank you for staying with us. The Australian and Papua New Guinea Defence Forces have ties that date back decades. With the change in the economic scene, the PNGDF, with the assistance of the Australian Defence Force and Heavy Lift, is trying out a new approach to maintaining the air transport wing fleet. Let's take a look.
Much of PNG is still rough country, and the only way to get anywhere would be by air. Heavy Lift is no stranger to this fact. The company has been operating in PNG since 1994 and has a number of aircrafts in their fleet. Heavy Lift has a variety of operational roles, including oil and gas industry support, offshore and onshore, mining industry support, heliring, oil and mineral exploration, seismic surveys, passenger transport, VIP and general. Heavy Lift is now part of the 3-way contract with the Australian Defence Force and the Papua New Guinea Defence Force to service and maintain 3 helicopters. These Australian Defence Force helicopters will be on a 2-year lease to the PNGDF. Several members of the diplomatic community and members of the PNGDF were present to witness this ceremony. The country's defense force has had aircraft support from several renowned military heavies. The United States had assisted with the Beechcraft Super King Air, several Douglas Dakotas, and the Bell Huey Iroquois helicopters, Spain with the Casa CN-235, and Israel with the Aravas. Out of all these aircrafts, only about 4 are barely in service. 1 Iroquois, the Casa, and the Arava. But the air transport wing is looking at an overhaul of their fleet.
Thank you. I am Lieutenant Colonel Kisakau Pusangat Powasau. I'm the commanding officer of the air transport wing, and the air transport wing is the tactical asset, a strategic asset of the commander PNGDF himself. And our role is to maintain operational capability for tactical airlift so that we can achieve commander's intent and the mission that he sets for us. We provide mobility to the other elements of the military, like the land and the sea. And in the last few years, our mission have enlarged through the approval of the headquarters to support government agencies also. And today I'm a very, very proud man because I could not continue to say that I'm a strategic asset without the strategic airlift, which is uniquely provided by the rotary wing capability, which is the helicopters here. So now I'm a proud commanding officer of an operational unit, and I can advise my commander that I'm operational with tactical capability, waiting for the mission.
And the Australians are showing us a new approach to maintenance and servicing.
What these helicopters do is they provide an initial and immediate air capability to the air transport wing. And what they will do is provide 100 hours per month 1,200 hours per year, paid for by Australian Defence and provided into the air transport wing. And so the administration and the safety are an issue for myself and for heavy lift Jan Boy. But the CEO here and his team, all they have to do is help fly them during the 2-year contract period. I look very much forward because civil registration, civil certification is the way of the future, I believe, for PNG Defence aviation capability. So we look forward very much to working with PNG Civil Aviation Safety Authority to ensure that these 2 aircraft remain taskable and also remain safe wherever they're working throughout PNG. The main thing is to understand is that it's a 3-way combination between Commonwealth of Australia, between Heavy Lift Group, and also as the user operations user of the aircraft is Air Transport Wing PNGDF. Now all the training will be done by Heavy Lift Group as part of the contract. Now sometime throughout that, Australian Defence will be able to send a couple of COs, people to Australia, to Cairns to do extra courses. But many of these aspects also are PNG responsibilities. So the PNGDF Air Transport Wing is actually paying for pilots being trained in Australia at Tamworth anyway. So it is hoped that over 2 years, over 3 years, those pilots will come back and take over what is now a wet lease with Heavy Lift, but then transition into a time when PNGF pilots and loadmasters will crew these aircraft. But that's in the future.
Heavy Lift has the capabilities to support this service, and they have already worked out how to go about doing this.
Well, Heavy Lift's role is quite, crucial to a certain degree. It's a 3-way membership, effectively. It's also the ability for us as industry to transfer skills all the way from crew to engineering to backroom support to the people of Papua New Guinea. Heavy Lift is a committed Papua New Guinea company, has been here since 1975 and very much understands the role of aviation and is also well aware of the requirements of aviation. As of today, aviation is very dynamic, aviation changes, there's a lot of responsibility put on safety management, there's a lot of responsibility put on quality, and that is our responsibility as custodians of the AOC to ensure that we can provide safe operations. However, to do that, this is a training partnership that we have with the PNG Defence Force, and we welcome the opportunity, and we believe that together we can provide a great service and we can provide the capability that the PNG Defence Force is looking for.
That was our report on the new addition to the PNGDF's Air Transport Wing. We shall be back for more. Do stay with us. You're watching Resource PNG. Let's continue with that report on the PNGDF Air Transport Wing.
Pilot Wayne Williman firmed that resolved in Pidgin for the locals.
It's like training and by Benny 116 belong ATW, all technical record staff, loadmaster, all crewmen, pilots, all quality safety, all workman. All money work long store personnel, the inside long operations belong ATW. Some people all training, if I come up long outside heavy lift, all floor training by heavy lift yet by big inside long operations floor. All base Santa Lo Mountain Hagen, Tamblo Lo Cairns, Australia. People believe na people trust us. This lo work people carry camp lo work want them ATW. And by bringing good lo kai lo bien time lo lo not all but lo future ATW.
This is a new way of thinking, and the Papua New Guinea Defence Force are committed to this change. And the man heading the Air Transport Wing, Lieutenant Kisokau Poweseu, conquers and wants to stick to the plan.
We are an operational command unit. The selection of pilots and engineers, they are part of the general recruitment and processes that is conducted by the personnel branch of the headquarters Papua New Defence Force. So we just we give our requirement as to how many pilots we require, how many aircraft engineers we require, how many crew, loadmasters we require to headquarters through our Directorate of Air. and then the headquarters then go out there and instigate the processes of selecting the right people with the right qualification, right aptitude, and they get trained, and then when they get operational, they get sent down to us. So in the military, you have the personnel which selects them, and they give them the training command who trains them, and then they get sent to us when they're operational. The training that we are very, very pleased to have in this arrangement with the Australian government and Heavy Lift is the training of our own people who are already aircraft pilots and engineers who are here to train to that level. Of course, we need more pilots, we need more engineers, and when the Defence Force train them, after they acquire qualification, then they come here and then they go into the training program so that they can achieve level of competency to operate these two aircraft, either as aircraft engineers or pilots or aircrew. At the moment, we have 13 pilots because we have not been recruiting for the last 20 years. Most of the pilots are young like me, and about 40. So we now have 4 pilots down in Tamworth. They should finish by the end of this month. And I'm been advised by my Director of Air Operations that the Chief of Personnel Branch is about to call for nominations or applications for recruiting of new pilots. We have 2 female pilots. They are both officers, of course. And one just got back from Chopper Line in Kalandra last year.
So what are these aircrafts? Of these 3 rotary wing helicopters are the 2 which are medium-sized aircraft and the other is light. The maximum takeoff weight for a medium-sized aircraft is about a maximum of 5 tons, that is equal to about 13 fully equipped military personnel and 2 crew members, while the light-sized craft, the Bell 407, is almost 3 tons.
Okay, this is a Bell 212. And the figure in front called 2 signals the number of the blades. That's a 412, it's got 4 blades, 212, 2 blades. Now, this is called a rotary wing because unlike the fixed wing, where the wing itself produces the lift while the engine produces the propulsion, in this helicopter, the rotary, the blades, they are both the wing and the propulsion also. So it's called rotary. And this aircraft can carry up to 13 people, which means can carry up to 13 troops, fully armed, with 2 crew. It can go up to maximum. It can go up to 18,000 feet, which means it can actually land troops anywhere in Papua New Guinea, including the highest point in Papua New Guinea, Mount William. So that is why it's tactical, and the rotary wing is tactical because that it is not restricted like fixed wing where you need a prepared clear runway. If you notice under the helicopter, there's a equipment in there where you can actually rappel troops down. You can rappel troops. You can rescue people too from this helicopter. It's got 2 engines and it's got the modern equipment. They're all backup system. So the chances of it falling out of the sky are almost nil. 13 combat crews with 2 pilots. You can carry cargoes, of course, But the combat groups come with about 120 kilograms of equipment.
So far, we have only the Bell 212 and 214, but there is another on the way.
We have two aircraft here, as you can see, and these are Bell 212s and 412s. There's a 3rd helicopter that we will bring in to help convert pilots who have been trained but they've got no currency and they've got very little qualifications. That light helicopter will be the training helicopter to help get those pilots and navigators and crewmen up to their civilian and military qualifications.
The Australian government is committed to assisting the PNGDF.
It is the day that marks the recommencement of an operational air capability for the PNGDF. Of course, it's also a day where Papua New Guinea takes that bold democratic step forward and commences the 2012 elections. So a happy day in many, many ways. Thank you, Nahamas long all line long sing you may pay him han long. That too was a proud, symbolic indication of Papua New Guinean strength and leadership, so I thank them also for that. Thank you, Olgeta.
Certainly, these aircrafts will go a long way in saving Papua New Guinea.
Stay with us. We'll be back after these short messages. Welcome back. The PNG LNG project would mean a lot of money coming into our economy. What can be done to ensure that people of PNG benefit from this project? Other countries have gone through similar situations. Some dealt with their resource boom successfully, while others not so well. Earlier, I spoke with Matthew Morris, the Deputy Director of the Australian National University's Development Policy Centre, who gave us an analysis on what PNG could do to take advantage of this opportunity. Good evening, and tonight we have Matt Morris, a researcher and economist with the Australian National University. Good evening, Matt.
Good evening.
So tell us, what exactly do you do? And I believe you had something to do with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the setup of it.
Yeah. I'm the Deputy Director at the Development Policy Centre at ANU, which means I do research on aid and development policy. And one of the good things about that job is it gets me back up to Papua New Guinea, where I started my career as an economist in the PNG government. So I worked here in the late 90s, back when the commodity prices weren't quite so good. And the economy was on the brink of collapse. So it's good to come back a decade later and see how things have changed and help with some of the new challenges facing Papua New Guinea, which really relate to the latest resource boom and how to manage all the wealth from the LNG project.
Right. Thank you. Now, talking about the resource boom, we know of two countries that have gone through resource booms, Nigeria and Malaysia. Now, one country has, we would say, fared better than the other. Malaysia is one that actually fared better. Nigeria wouldn't say so much. So with Nigeria, what did they get right?
Yeah. After I left Papua New Guinea, I worked in Nigeria for 3 years as the lead economist for the UK government's aid programme there. And what was interesting about Nigeria is it gives a classic example of the resource curse. This is the phenomenon whereby countries which are blessed with large amounts of natural resources tend to grow slower than countries without resources. And there are a number of reasons for this. One is the volatility of revenues, so commodity prices go up and down, so it creates large fluctuations in revenues coming into government, which affects the performance of government services. Another is the loss of competitiveness of the non-resource sector. So an appreciation of the exchange rate makes it an appreciation of the exchange rate leads to a loss of competitiveness, which means it's less good for the agricultural sector or manufacturing. And the other aspect of the resource curse relates to governance. So quite often in resource-rich countries, because the link between the government and taxpayers is weak, leaders tend to be less accountable, and so there tends to be more corruption and weaker performance in terms of government delivery of services.
So with Nigeria, what I read about it is that the agricultural sector was all right before. After the resource boom, it seems they have just slowed down a little in that sector.
Yeah, Nigeria went from being the world's largest exporter of palm oil 20, 30 years ago, and today 95% of exports are made up of oil. So the non-oil exports are only 5% of the economy.
So just looking at all that's happened there, what do you think Papua New Guinea can learn from Nigeria's example?
I think there are several traps that countries can fall into. So we know what the basic ingredients are for economic success. So lots of economists have done lots of reports documenting the kind of things that countries do to be successful and to have fast and sustained growth. One of the best reports was by the Growth Commission, which was a panel of 22 policymakers, academics, people from the business sector. And what they found was that there's no miracle to fast economic growth. It's just a case of getting the basic ingredients, which really come down to things like having strong leadership, getting the incentives and the basic public investments right to unleash private sector growth, and then integrating effectively into the global economy. Unfortunately, whilst the sort of the basic ingredients are known, there are a number of traps that countries can fall into. So one might say that the kind of the path to prosperity is kind of beset with various sort of perils and pitfalls. So it's kind of a narrow winding path which is easy to fall off. So some of the traps that countries typically fall into, and I'm talking now across Africa and other parts of the world, conflict is one of the major traps that countries can fall in, and obviously we've had the experience here in Papua New Guinea with Bougainville. Another one is the resource curse, which I've talked about in the case of Nigeria, and obviously the phase that Papua New Guinea is going through now with the mineral boom has some similarities to other countries like Nigeria. Another trap which countries can fall into is related to poor governance. So one of the lessons from around the world is that countries which have very poor governance, weak, ineffectual government systems and corruption, that can destroy economic progress at an alarming rate. So these are the kind of traps that any country can fall into. So the issue is for Papua New Guinea is how to apply stay on the path to prosperity and pursue the things which need to be done, but to avoid falling into any of those traps. And the Sovereign Wealth Fund is one of the ingredients to managing the risks associated with the mineral boom. So what the Sovereign Wealth Fund effectively does, it manages the volatility in revenue flows from the resource sector and helps to stop the appreciation of the exchange rate so that there's not a loss of competitiveness in the economy. So a lot of work's been done over the last couple of years to design a sovereign wealth fund for Papua New Guinea, with the organic law passed earlier this year. So now the government team is working on actually getting the sovereign wealth fund actually set up and preparing the necessary supporting legislation for that sovereign wealth fund. So it's a key ingredient in terms of how to manage the mineral boom, but there's obviously a lot of other things which government needs to do as well.
All right. So we've talked about Nigeria. Now the country that has prospered from a mineral boom would be Malaysia. Mm-hmm. They've done something right there. Mm-hmm. What do you think Papua New Guinea learned from that, and what did they get right?
Yes, the thing Malaysia and Nigeria both have in common is they're both blessed with large amounts of oil resources. But whereas Nigeria kind of went down the path of the classic resource curse, Malaysia was able to tap into that resource wealth and use that to put in place the necessary infrastructure and to diversify the economy. So they managed to turn the curse into a blessing, as it were. And it really comes down to having, as I said, the strong government leadership, using the wealth to make the necessary investments in infrastructure, such that encourages the development of other sectors of the economy. So now Malaysia's a major exporter of electronics, semiconductors and things like that. The resource sector is still an important part of the economy. So Petronas, for example, I think about 40% of government revenues come from taxes and royalties, etc., from Petronas. But because they've diversified the economy, they've not gone down the same path as Nigeria. So that, I guess the lesson for Papua New Guinea is to look at the revenues coming from the LNG project and what is the best way to spend those revenues to spread the benefits of the resource boom to other parts of the economy and to improve the competitiveness. And so one of the things which gets talked about very often is the state of Papua New Guinea's roads. So we know that only about a third of the national roads are in a good condition. So one of the really good investments that the PNG government could make is to take some of the revenues from the Sovereign Wealth Fund and the resource boom more generally, and then to translate those into better services for the people, particularly on things like road infrastructure, but also on other key national economic infrastructure, airports, ports, etc. And then of course there's key gaps in terms of health and education, big investments needed there. But we know from the experience of other countries that unless government can get those investments right, the prospects for kind of staying on that narrow path to prosperity are very limited. So what government does now in terms of its investment is critically important.
So you talked about diversifying an economy. How does the government do that?
As I said, one of the things from the resource curse is you get an appreciation of the exchange rate, which reduces the competitiveness. So that means, for say, if you're a farmer in a rural area, because the exchange rate appreciates, the amount that you get in kina term goes down. So the amount of the returns to investing in those non-mineral sectors goes down. So one of the things that government can do is to help to stabilize the appreciation of the exchange rate to maintain competitiveness in those other sectors of the economy. The other thing which can be done, we know that infrastructure is critically important for many sectors of the economy. The rural economy depends upon roads as its lifeblood, but we also know that ports are incredibly important, both for importing in inputs but also exporting. You only have to go up to Lae and see all the ships queued up at the harbour there to know that fixing up the Lae port would have a dramatic impact on various sectors of the economy. So these are practical things which the government can do to help diversify the economy. It's not so much a case of picking winners and this company gets these incentives, but giving the other sectors of the economy a fair chance and helping them all on their way.
Okay, thank you. Please stay with us. When we return, we shall have more of that interview. Let us continue with that interview with the Deputy Director of ANU's Development Policy Center, Matthew Morris. Now, let's touch on the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Yes.
That's to manage all that's come through, that will be coming through from the LNG project. You touched on it a little during in the first part of this interview. How else is it going to benefit us? Because what we worry about would be there's a whole lot of money there. How do we actually keep track of what's happening?
Okay. I think the Sovereign Wealth Fund serves several purposes. I guess one of the challenges that countries with large amounts of resource revenues face is it's not a regular income. It's a very volatile income. So if we look back at the late 1990s, oil prices were down at $14 a barrel. The government didn't have enough money to pay for utility bills, was running up large arrears. It was pretty much broke. If you compare that to the last 5 years or so, the government's had more money than it's really been able to spend effectively. So I guess it's a bit like sort of pay fortnight having lots of money and then on the loose week not having much money, but from a national government perspective. So one of the things which the Sovereign Wealth Fund is smooth that out so that the national budget has a smoother and more predictable allocation of resources, which then enables policymakers to plan more effectively how they deliver basic services in health, education and roads, etc. The other thing which the Sovereign Wealth Fund does, as I mentioned, it helps to stop a large injection of liquidity or money into the economy, which can put upward pressure on the exchange rate, which, as I said, is damaging for the non-resource sector. And finally, the Sovereign Wealth Fund can help deal with intergenerational issues. So the oil or the mineral resources which are in the ground, conceptually those are a resource not just for current generations of Papua New Guineans, but for future generations of Papua New Guineans. So if one generation digs those resources out and spends them, what does that mean for future generations? So the Sovereign Wealth Fund helps to save for future generations, and ideally government policy complements that by making sure that revenues are invested as well. So again, that's another benefit for future generations.
Thank you. So here we go. Anything else to add regarding this?
I think the passing of the Sovereign Wealth Fund legislation was an important milestone, and sets a good platform to build from in terms of managing the resource boom. But I think it would be a mistake to think that the Sovereign Wealth Fund is the solution and everything else is going to be easy. I think the real hard yards are really in terms of improving the quality of public investments in things like health, education and roads. And we know that there's a lot more which needs to be done in those areas. I think one of the things which commentators often come back to is that there's not a lack of policies and good ideas about what government needs to do, but that the implementation isn't there. And I think one of the common denominators in the quality of implementation is the issue of accountability, the accountability of leaders and government departments to actually deliver what they say they were going to do. And so one of the encouraging signs, I think, from recent years has been the growing voice of ordinary Papua New Guineans in public discourse around what's happening in terms of government policy. And we only have to look at the rise of things like Facebook and discussion forums on the internet in terms of providing valuable feedback to policymakers about what perhaps they're doing right, but often what they're doing wrong. Related to that, I think the other big opportunity has been the massive growth in mobile phones here in Papua New Guinea. So when I was here in the late 90s, only a few thousand people had mobile phones. Today there are about 2 million mobile phone subscribers. So I think the potential for mobile phones to be more than just a means of communicating with friends and family, but potentially to be a means of getting feedback about whether services are getting out to rural areas or not, whether roads are being maintained or not. These potentially change the incentives for policymakers and government departments such that they improve the quality of the services they deliver. So I think there's a lot of other things which need to be done. Government needs to do its bit, but ultimately I think there's a huge opportunities for all Papua New Guineans to have a say in how the country is run and provide feedback.
Thank you for all that information. So is there anything else you'd like to add, Matt?
Yes, I think it's just worth making the point that the Sovereign Wealth Fund is an important contribution to managing the resource boom in Papua New Guinea and sets an important foundation. But there are a lot of other things which need to be done. There's some real hard yards still to be made. In particular, improving the performance of government in terms of its public investments in things like infrastructure, health and education. But I also think there's some important opportunities for Papua New Guineans to have a more direct involvement in terms of government and how the country is run. And we've seen in the last year or so definitely a significant rise in the number of people engaging in discussion and debates on social media such as Facebook. But more generally, 10 years ago hardly anyone had a mobile phone. 10 years later we've got about 2 million mobile phone subscribers. So the opportunities for people in very remote parts of Papua New Guinea to provide feedback on whether basic services have been delivered in health and education or whether roads are fixed, and for those issues to be brought to the attention of leaders is very different. So I think in terms of managing the resource boom, the Sovereign Wealth Fund is an important start. It now needs to be established. The delivery of basic government services is important, and obviously there's a big agenda for government to improve their services. But I think the big opportunity is for ordinary Papua New Guineans to have a say in terms of providing feedback to government on government service delivery and to have their influence on government policy.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That ends another evening with Resource PNG. Thank you for being with us. Next week, we take a closer look at the work of the National Research Institute. We also have a report on World Bank's reconstruction of the Hiritano Highway between Malalawa and Kerama and the Gulf Province. We hope you could join us. And please remember, if you have any queries, do drop us an email on this email address, resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Until next time, have a good night.